So not having that, not knowing, it's almost like walking in the dark and not knowing where you're going. If you don't know, how do you know you're doing the right thing, and how do you know you do the right thing for your customers? So
welcome to Process Pioneers, the show that takes a deep dive into the minds of decision makers, key influencers, and process experts who are pioneering the world of everything process.
Welcome to the next episode of Process Pioneers. My name is Daniel Rayner. I'm the host of Process Pioneers, and in each of these episodes, I get the absolute privilege of sitting down with BPM practitioners and specialists. I find these conversations fascinating because each of the people I'm talking with come from with their own background of experiences, a range of different organizations from a range of different industries in how do we adopt and implement a business process management approach. How do we do it successfully? What are some of the challenges that we may need to overcome in our journey? And in today's conversation, I have the absolute privilege of sitting down with Sanya Naumovich-Popovich, who is a senior manager of process governance and architecture at one of the big banks in the ANZ region. And so very excited for this conversation. Sanya has got 20 plus years in the IT space, so has a depth of experience there in a range of organizations. So I'm very excited for this conversation. Sanya, thanks for joining me.
thank you for inviting me. Pleasure to be here.
So what we might do to begin with is when were you first introduced to BPM? I know for some people, they kind of stumble their way into it. For others, it's more of a formal training. And then take us on a bit of a journey leading up to what you're doing today.
So as you mentioned, I have spent a number of years implementing solutions across different industries. And as we all know, when we implement something new, we need to understand the current state. And business processes underpin it all. So to be able really to understand the current state, assess the impact of change, and define future state, you need to understand your business processes. And then as we go through that journey, different organizations are at different levels of maturity. So being in the delivery seat, you will be sooner or later faced with lack of either defined processes or lack of a common process repository, lack of governance, and all of that would make it harder for the implementation to meet its objectives. And so I was really faced with that from the first implementation, right? You find that is not there. And then I guess one of the other things is that what we all find is that coming as external consultants or being internal in organizations, the outcomes of the projects are often not recorded anywhere. So all that time and money is spent recording this information, and it's just gone. So how do we actually store that in a common space where everybody can use? So I guess over the years you keep seeing these things, and then I was really lucky to be part of the implementation of the BPM as a lead business analyst, and then from there on stayed as to manage process governance and architecture. So I was able to actually apply some of the learnings and some of the issues I have come up across the years.
That's fantastic. That's great. And what would you say? You've obviously seen some organizations adopt this BPM approach. What would you say are some of the biggest drivers to adopt BPM as a management approach? Do you think it differs between the different industries or different maybe maturity of organization? But what drives an organization to want to understand their processes and improve them?
So, well, as I mentioned before, so then you can say, well, every initiative, and you can think of BPM as one of them when you start, right? So it's everything we do. We talk about reduced costs, improved productivity and quality. We talk about reduced risk. And each organization will have different levers that they pull, or depending on their strategic goals, different things will be important to them or pain points. So it's really understanding what these are and then tailoring to that.
Yes. Okay. And what risks are there for an organization if they're not understanding their business processes? I know that, there are different organizations that are at a different process maturity level. There are some large organizations out there that currently don't have visibility on their processes, they're not documented in any sort of way, shape, or form. Are there risks there for these organizations to be concerned about? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, one of the interesting things, especially in banking, you could say, well, what about how do you evidence your compliance? How can you show, how can you prove that, yes, you are meeting your compliance obligations, but how do you prove that? And really through processes, if you have your business architecture, if you have your processes linked with obligations, risks, and controls, then you can immediately say, this is how we go about this, and this is how we meet our obligations. So not having that, not knowing, it's almost like walking in the dark and not knowing where you're going. If you don't know, how do you know you're doing the right thing, and how do you know you do the right thing for your customers? So
Yeah, that's great. And for an organization that has, I guess, reached that point where they understand the value, that they recognize the value in having that transparency and being able to understand what's going on, what are some common challenges that an organization may face when adopting this BPM approach? I know that from our brief conversation we had before we got started today, you mentioned that you'd been part of a number of implementations that didn't get off the ground, but the latest one has been successful and is still successful. So what are some of those challenges that organizations need to be aware of as they're, I guess, embarking on this BPM journey?
So I think that always, and again, going back to implementation, so you need to think, what is your roadmap really, and how do you measure your success? And have measures in place so that you know you're meeting your goals and you're on the right track. Then often we find in implementations that people choose to have minimum viable product, which is fine. And it's good to have a pilot. You can show the success and test and learn. But then that it is important not to finish at that and not to be the final product. So it's, again, really having that roadmap. And then I think finally it's about embedding. So you have implemented something, and it's like any tool, it's sitting there. Are people using it? How do you ensure that everybody's actually every day looking at their processes, maintaining their processes, using them in decision making? So how do you get that maturity across the organization to enable that?
Right. And how do you do that? How do you, I guess, encourage or foster that buy-in, that adoption, so that, you're not just documenting processes that are just going to be sitting there and collecting dust, but it's actually a valuable repository that people are actively engaging with and using?
So a number of things. So the process ownership is really important, but then again, having nominated process owner does not mean that much will happen out of that. So it's really bringing that process community and process awareness across the organization. Even from the moment someone walks in the bank, they know that there is this one central place for processes, and this is what we do as a bank. And then think about how you can actually link these processes that have been created with the training material. So having them serve different audiences and different use cases, and having that communication with lots of people.
That's great. And do you find that you spend more time trying to get adoption and buy-in from the process participants and the process performers, or should you be spending more time getting that buy-in and adoption? Well, yeah, I guess buy-in or sponsorship from the senior leaders. I guess getting that sponsorship from the senior leaders, that's probably more early on in the piece. Once you've got them on board, it's then about getting the rest of the organization. What does it look like in terms of reporting or I guess continually updating your senior leaders that, hey, this thing that we've adopted, it is working well, it is kicking goals, we are achieving our targets? Is that something that there needs to be a close communication line there with your senior leaders?
So, well, it depends which part of how far on your journey you are. So if the system is already implemented and you are already have got it in place and people are using it, And I guess you can achieve that quicker or slower depending on the budget, depending on each organization. But once you have reached that, I think it is important to make it visible and accessible to everybody. It is important to actually show and keep that message going, so that, for example, if a process owner says, if someone comes to a process owner or one of the business me's and asks about their process, and if they say, don't ask me, here is where the information is, go and have a look. So it's getting more and more of that happening, and talking to people and and through these communities, actually hearing their voice and showing that their voice is heard and embedding into what you do.
Right. Okay. So making sure that the people that are at the coalface, or the people on the frontline employees, that they have the ability to collaborate and feedback on the process.
Yes, on the approach that we do, on perhaps the way how we could improve on build, because not everybody in the organization will be doing modeling, but they will be using it for one reason or the other. So making it accessible to everybody and knowing that it is there.
Yeah. And I guess that if there are any changes that are going to be made or implemented, which is a core point of taking on this approach, is to make improvements and to optimize the way that the organization delivers value, it's probably going to look like jobs are going to be changed. People's roles are going to look differently moving into the future. We do have, with automation and robots and different technology like this, people's work is going to change moving forward. So I guess there is that need to bring these people on board and get their buy-in or sponsorship. Otherwise, there could be some kickback or resistance. Is that something that you've had to navigate, like kickback and resistance to process improvements?
Yeah, I guess it is always the case, and it is something that is inevitable. And again, I guess each person in itself, we are all different. Some people they take change and they take and go with the change. Some people resist it. So it's really how we tailor that to the message to work with everybody, or with these different types.
Yeah, great. That's awesome. And I think one thing for our audience that's going to be listening to this conversation is we have a wide range of people that listen to the Process Pioneers series, working from a wide range of organizations. Some are at a higher process maturity level, and some are at a lower process maturity level. But I think one question that is often asked is what is possible with BPM? Show me the tangible evidence. Show me some use cases where a BPM approach was adopted and it significantly increased efficiency, or it significantly reduced waste in this particular area, or we were able to optimize this part of the business. I have this question that's asked of me, show me examples and case studies of where this is happening in real life, and who has adopted it well. Do you have a couple of stories or examples where through this BPM approach, it has delivered significant value to an organization, whether it's on a very micro level on one particular process, or whether it's more on a macro level?
So I think the key if you think about it overall, the problem statement and what it is with all improvement initiatives, I think if you don't understand the problem that you're trying to solve, and if that problem is not articulated, and you don't have a good understanding of the current state, it's either that you may implement improvement that doesn't meet the outcomes that you would expect it to get, because you haven't measured, you don't know the information, or what we find sometimes is that part of the process has been improved, but then because it's only just one little part of the process, the rest of the upstream and downstream processes are impacted, because now they need to take into account this change, and that change is more complex. Now suddenly their processes, because of that, have become more complex. So I think the key is understanding that cross-divisional and cross-functional processes, and that is, so it's, if you think about the baselines, so you stabilize your processes, you understand your current state before you can improve and move forward. So I think having that cross-functional and upstream and downstream understanding is really the key to any improvement initiative.
That's great. It reminds me of the other day I was out playing golf for one of the first times. I don't normally play golf, but I was invited out by a friend, and this was actually going back to the first time just a couple of months ago. And my friend, he plays multiple times a week through work, and he's got a pretty good job. And one of the first questions before I even hit a ball, I asked him, give me some tips, give me some pointers, tell me how I need to, what I can do to make sure that I can hit the ball and hit it well. And he responded to me, he said, well, have a swing at the ball first, because until I can understand what I'm working with, I won't be able to tell you how you can improve or what you need to improve on. I guess we all have a natural. If we were given, if you were handed a golf club and asked, hit this ball, we're all going to have a natural sort of automatic way of doing it. Response, and but he needed to see what my natural response was before he could give me any advice to improve. And I think it was, I swung at the ball and it was a shocking hit, and the ball sort of bumbled along the ground, and I'm teeing off with a driver, so meant to be going 200, 300 meters or whatever my friend's hitting, and my ball goes probably 10, 15 meters, just rolls along the ground. So he knows what he's working with there, and he's able to give me pointers and some tips. But I think the lesson I learned from that was it does relate to process improvement, and unless you know what you're starting with, unless you know what your baseline is or what your starting position is, how do you know what to improve? How do you know you're improving the right area? How do you know you're not improving something where there's actually another weak area that's screaming for help? And so, it was an interesting lesson, I walked away with. But what would you say, moving forward, where do organizations need to invest their time, effort, and energy if they want to embark on this BPM journey? If they're just starting out, they haven't got a tool set yet, do they need to have some foundational elements in place, like a process team or process ownership or buy-in sponsorship from the senior leaders? What are the first steps that they need to consider when just getting started?
Well, I think it is important to articulate the value. So to be clear on why. So why is it that they're doing that, and think about what is applicable to them. What are perhaps some of the key pain points or what is the key for them that they could say, well, that the BPM would help. And it can help in everything, really, right? From the regulatory compliance, from the being able to serve customers better, understand customers. So it can do many things, and maybe choose one of these important areas, and then you can think of, well, think about the strong sponsorship. So having a key advocate amongst one of the key stakeholders always helps. So which area of these areas will have that person that can actually support you and be your advocate? And then I guess, even if you have a pilot, even if you have initially a pilot, even if you don't have a tool, what that would, just to show what it could look like, where are some of the benefits that not having a tool or not having, depending again on where you are and what you have, what differences would that make? And then just take steps gradually. But I think it's now when you asked about the team, and I guess perhaps initially you may have a team, or you may have a project team, or you may have a team of people that can be dedicated to do that. But the key is actually getting to a point that it is embedded, that you have lifted the capability. And but again, it's a journey. So the first steps could be starting from a small team, from one small pilot or a proof of concept building, but knowing where it is that you want to be.
And should you be starting off building out that process architecture, like that high level, level 1, level 2, or should we be starting off on your level 4, level 5, the more granular detail, or does it totally depend on what the implementation is for?
I think in any case, and I know people will have a different view, but I would always say do top down, regardless of how small or how big the point that it is. Do the top down, understand, use. I would adopt one of the, if the industry has already defined architecture or process classification hierarchy, start with that. Start with defined process architecture hierarchy for your industry, and apply the top-down approach. Even if it is a single process, go down the hierarchy, find its place, leverage what you can, and then what I also like to see is linked. So that level 4, when you link processes, you get like you can travel through, you can almost take your trip through, and as the more processes are being modeled, you see the points being joined, and which is really great.
That's great. That's awesome. And looking to the future in terms of technology, obviously over the last 5, 10, 15 years, we're seeing new exciting technologies like process mining and robotic process automation and various technologies that are all geared towards helping us optimize and improve and automate our business processes. What trends are you noticing as we move into the future? What do you think? Do you have any idea of what technology is going to look like in 3, 5, 10 years' time? Where do you think technology should be heading? Is our current technology working for us, or are there some sort of holes or gaps there?
So what I think that, so when we think about BPM and what it looks now, I think that it won't change drastically. So we will always need processes. We would need to understand them, have a central repository, all this standard stuff will remain. But I think where perhaps we will see, and what I would like to see more of, is the process intelligence and process mining being part of that more. And I think also visualization, because as we create our cross-functional processes and we link them together, how do we make that visually appealing or for different audiences, and so that they can actually use that when they make for decision making. They can use for different use cases, but making it easier for people that don't necessarily have a process background and want to see something, and especially supported by process intelligence and process mining that would give them that information. That is something that I think would be a huge value.
Okay. And do you think, like, obviously being a newer technology where I wouldn't say there are many organizations that have jumped into like this process intelligence, process mining just yet. What do you think some of the maybe objections there are, or hesitancy towards jumping into this technology? Do you think it's a concern that maybe they feel behind the 8 ball, they haven't been doing BPM for that long, and so they feel like jumping into this technology is well into the future for them? Or where do you think that sort of like hesitancy or potential objections come from?
I think it's probably all about maturity. So sometimes it is hard to talk about one if you haven't got your current processes mapped, if you have still your processes sitting somewhere on SharePoints and now you're trying to create something out of it. It's very hard. So I think it is, and then as with everything, just perhaps investment, any type of investment could be really hard, and it is to actually to have a business case that will stack up. So I think it's important to actually understand as with any implementation, and then work through the steps. But the value, I think the value is, and you can't measure out. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. I've had conversation. I had a conversation with someone just last week who they were, in the BPM space maybe 10 years ago or so, but they were, this is over in Europe, and they were struggling to see the value in their current in the organizations they were with back then. But since this whole idea of re-engineering your business processes through the data that's already in your system, all of a sudden it's come back up on their radar, and they're that much more interested in it now, because it's like, yeah, this is powerful. This is valuable to an organization to be able to quickly see where are our bottlenecks, where are our long idle times, where are the areas of the business that maybe are over-resourced or under-resourced, and how can we effectively sort of manage our workforce. So I think it's something that's will jump up the priority list. But I guess speaking of priority lists, how has BPM played a part in the last 18 months, particularly around the turbulent times that we have had with COVID? Like, obviously we've had organizations that have all been working in the one office building that have been spread out across the country, because everyone's working from their own home offices, and a lot more remote working now. And obviously COVID's disrupted a lot of supply chains and a lot of different organizations. Have you found BPM to have played an important part in the last 18 months? Do you think it's I guess, given the time, attention, and energy that it deserves?
Well, not that I can't say that, because what the interesting thing for us is that for the place where I work at the moment is that we have actually just commenced our key process modeling across the value chains when the COVID started. So it was an interesting experience, but we did actually well. So I think that any investment would be hard. So if we were to put a business case at that point to actually implement, probably would be other priorities. It's getting priorities from, especially with organizations that work directly with customers and that still have to support that model in some way. That would be probably on the top of priority, implementing a BPM. But certainly the ones that have done would have some benefits from that, and they can, because again, back to understanding processes. So suddenly now, if you need to move to online from perhaps branch network, you can understand what it means and better than what you would have otherwise.
Yeah. Okay, great. And there's this topic, or this I guess topic of conversation out there around incremental improvement versus radical innovation, and making minor tweaks or incremental tweaks on a more regular basis versus doing more radical transformation of a process or a business area. And I think probably driven by a lot of competition in the marketplace, a lot of disruption in the marketplace. If you're not innovating yourself, or if you're not disrupting your own organization, there are other organizations out there or startup companies that are trying to do that. So how do you determine how much time to focus on that incremental daily improvement versus rehauling an entire core process, because we need to continue to meet our customers' requirements or needs or demands, because that over in this other industry they're getting a flawless experience, and we need to radically innovate to keep up with the general experience they're getting from other organizations.
Well, certainly you would have frequently, as you said, small improvements that are really operational improvements, and improvements to processes and procedures that you're aware of or you're finding on a daily basis. But then obviously there will be time that you have to look and think about what do I need to change, or can I use perhaps the processes that I have already created. I'm creating a new product. Perhaps some of the processes that are already in place for this product can be leveraged. And again, having that cross-functional view helps understand, because if this new product is going to touch on the same, very much same parts of the value chain, you could almost take the same approach and then just replicate, or take some of the lessons learned, or perhaps take one of these products and move it to online to see how that works, and then shift the rest. So I think the key is really, to answer your question, yes, you will have small incremental improvements all the time. But I think it also, what I was trying to say is that having that end-to-end and that value chain view helps if you're doing more bigger changes to actually understand the impact across all, and where you can leverage and standardize.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's great. And for someone that's listening to this conversation, that maybe you've piqued their interest into this topic of BPM and what it can do for their organization. Obviously, you know, we can only fit so much into a 30-minute conversation, but where would you encourage that person to go now to learn more about BPM and what's right for their organization? How should they best approach the BPM journey? What are their first steps? Where would you encourage them to go to help them get started on this journey?
Well, I think that we all, as you mentioned, and also when you started the conversation today, we all come from different, so there is a cross from people from different backgrounds and different ways how they got to BPM. So therefore, each person will have their individual strengths and understanding, or the past experience that they will take on with them to the new role. So I think that definitely BP Trends would be place to go, because you can search, there is a lot of interesting material. And I have to say that these sessions, this Pioneer series, even though I do say that honestly, not just because of you, but I think that because of the different people that you invite to the series, and I think that because of that different perspectives that each person brings, I think everybody will find a thread that would interest them, and which they can continue on to research or understand further. So I think that having that broad community really helps, I think. So I would definitely recommend that too.
That's fantastic. That's great. Well, Sanya, I just want to thank you for sitting down with me and having this conversation today. I've certainly been gleaning a lot of notes myself, and I know that our audience will have gleaned a lot from this conversation as well. You're absolutely correct. I think, you know, every individual, every person does bring a different perspective, and there are going to be some people that really resonate with your journey and what you've been on. And I guess for someone that maybe they've got a lot out of our conversation, but maybe they've got a few questions for you. Where's the best way for them to maybe connect with you or reach out to you or follow your journey?
LinkedIn is a good place. They can just connect with me through LinkedIn. That's fine. Yeah.
Perfect. Great. Well, thanks for sitting down with me. It's been an absolute pleasure. And yeah, thanks for having this chat.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. It was really nice meeting you.